What happens when two dudes, one a retired Navy SEAL commander in Colorado Springs, and the other a hippie meditation teacher in New York City, get together to discuss living mindfully? That's a great question, because we don't know what will happen either. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness, with co-hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. Now, on to the show.
All right. Welcome to a special bonus episode of Men Talking Mindfulness. I'm John McCaskill, one of your hosts, and today we're actually going to have three hosts. It's going to be myself, my brother from another mother there, Will Schneider in New York City, and our recent guest, Dr. Clark Chilson from the University of Pittsburgh. We just wrapped up an episode on religion and mindfulness, or mindfulness and religion, and Dr. Clark enlightened us quite literally on a whole lot of things, but we are not here to talk about that today. What we're here to talk about today or now is masculinity, and we're excited to get into that. And we actually were just talking about how this episode was going to run, and Clark said he's going to flip the script on us, and he's going to interview us, and we're going to see where this goes. So honestly, we don't have a script for this. We're going completely unscripted. We're going completely off the cuff, and we're just going to have fun with it and see where it goes. So yeah, welcome guys. Great to see you.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this is the raw and uncut part.
That's right. That's right.
And unapologetic. Yeah.
Unapologetic. Yeah. So first of all, I want to say I'm glad you're making time to do this. Will and I have been talking about masculinity and mindfulness for a few years now, right? Mm-hmm. And part of the concern was articulated in a book that came out a while ago titled Mindful America, The Mutual Transformation of Buddhist Meditation and American Culture by Jeff Wilson, who is a scholar in religious studies. And on page 146, he writes this, and I quote, "There are very few overtly male-gendered depictions of mindfulness. One of the only ones is a book titled Freeing the Angry Mind, How Men Can Use Mindfulness and Reason to Save Their Lives and Relationships, by David Wexler and Peter Bancart. Where female-oriented mindfulness books show a range of possible lifestyles and role models, as well as at times targeting gendered and connected anxieties, such as eating habits and monogamous relationships, mindfulness offers little in the way of attractive, affirmative lifestyles designed specifically for men." And so in America today, mindfulness is largely talked about amongst females, and there's lots of books written by females, and there's lots of mindfulness instructors that are female. But according to Jeff Wilson and my own experience, there's much less going on amongst men in the mindfulness world. And so I want to talk a little bit with you about how your program might be able to change that. And so first, I'm just going to start off with that question, which is, what are your hopes for this podcast, Men Talking Mindfulness, to get more men involved in a practice where there's not a lot of cultural resources to make it attractive to them?
I'll jump in, Will, and I'll start with, we're hoping that this will be one of those resources that would be available to men. So literally, if a man jumps on Google, or not even a man, how about a masculine type? I want to put it that way. And jumps on Google and says masculinity and mindfulness, or men and mindfulness, this bubbles to the surface pretty quickly, right at the top of the Google search engine. I mean, not just so that we can have a number one podcast, but so that we can be a resource that's readily available for people who need it. And then two, I think with Will and my background, I like to consider myself a man's man, a masculine type, but still able to tap into these practices and share them openly and share how they have benefited me as a man, as a man, as a human being, as a husband, as a father, what they have done for me, these practices, meditation and mindfulness. And then, discussed that in the last episode, and that they're not necessarily the same thing. There's some overlap there, but they're not the same thing. And it's important to understand that. But the two together have greatly benefited me, living more mindfully and then having my own personal meditation practice that has, again, made me a better man, a better person, better father, better husband. So I think it's important that those who are practicing get comfortable sharing it so that more people, more masculine types can, in fact, start practicing themselves.
Yeah, I like that last part you said, John. And I think that the two of us teaming up, and being two, guys, and like kind of, or consider alpha males in some ways that are coming together and really talking about mindfulness and all the practices of mindfulness. And along with that, those practices comes just a deeper sense of self, with more authenticity, with more openness. Like, I know vulnerability can be almost a taboo word in kind of the masculine space, because it just creates or kind of takes down the wall of that protection that we've talked about with confined masculinity, and how we're only rewarded for our aggression or our dominance or our athletic prowess, or how incredibly, or the kind of winners that we are. And what we're trying to develop here, Clark and Clark, we've been talking for years, and you're kind of on the back end of the, not necessarily the show, but like of my influence in how I'm continually showing up as a teacher, as a male teacher of exactly what that book is talking about, like a kind of a figure of mindfulness as a man. And we've been continually trying to create this conversation as a way of all people, but because we are two men that are doing this, to kind of look in this direction and be like, oh wait, like there must be something here if guys like this are taking their time every week. And it takes us quite a bit of effort to produce this show every week. And we do it from a servant leadership kind of place, because of the impacts like John has talked about, and they've had the same impacts on my life. It makes me a better man. It makes me a better leader. It makes me a better son. It makes me a better citizen in my community. It has created more relaxation and patience, and it's made me a better listener. I think we kind of talked about that in the last show, and how incredibly important that is. We actually have a show coming up about leadership through listening, because that's how incredibly important it is to be able to have those skills. And also, I feel that the old patriarchal paradigm is slowly becoming extinct, because it has created a lot more harm than good in the world. And we're seeing it play out, generation after generation. And I think we're reaching a certain point in our generation and the generations, that are coming up, to be like, this doesn't work. And one of the ways that I feel we're going to be able to shift and get out of, and I really suggest, and I know, Clark, you listened to it as well, Reinventing Masculinity with Dr. Ed Frauenheim and Adams. Yeah, Ed Frauenheim. Really, they're a great book, Reinventing Masculinity. Really, really, really great read. If you want to see and kind of, because you're going to get on this ride eventually, because it's not going to stop. Like this is mindfulness and masculinity and man and mindfulness is only going to continue to increase because of the benefits like myself and John and I have been talking about. And there is a more peaceful way to live and a more powerful way as well. It's not just I'm going to be passive and peaceful, right? But I'm more productive and more proactive in my life because of the all these practices and what they've done for me as a person by showing up and practicing, but then also not just but taking these practices into the world. So yeah.
I'll jump on the Reinventing Masculinity book and we had 2 or 3 episodes on that a couple of seasons ago in our second season with Ed Adams and Ed Frauenheim, and I saw some emails flying between you, Clark, and Will. There it is, Reinventing Masculinity. There's the book, and I saw, Clark, how you would like their use of the term confined masculinity instead of toxic masculinity. I mean, which we hear a lot these days. And for our listeners who may not have read that book or may not have listened to those past episodes, they are very clear in that masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. When you take masculinity and you force it on someone, or your beliefs of what masculinity should be, and you force it on someone, that action in and of itself is masculinity is not. Forcing it, what you believe masculinity to be, on someone else, that's the toxic side of things. But their use of the term confined masculinity is great because they say essentially that masculinity in Western society, or most society, is believed to be the provider, the conqueror, and I'm forgetting one side there, Will. I think you may be looking it up in the book, but the provider, the conqueror, and one other piece.
Protector. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
And the protector. But really, in life, there's so much more. There's so many other roles that we can play: the nurturer, the lover, the artist, the creator, those types of things. And that's where we're literally confining ourselves as men by not letting ourselves experience those other aspects to humanity. So I just wanted to kind of further bring out the Redefining Masculinity book and how they talk about confined masculinity, and then they take confined masculinity, and when you get out of it and they unpack it. Will, what was the term they use in the book?
Liberating masculinity.
Thank you. Liberating masculinity.
And that's a great word too. Like, cause it's really, it's freeing. It's freeing instead of just being stuck in the heteronormative, acceptable and also seemingly systematic, if you will, ways of being as a man in this world right now. There is a whole nother way, or a whole nother added, not just like you have to shift and totally change everything. Yeah, we can be aggressive and we can be domineering and that sort of stuff. Like that's just part of everybody, not just men. But to be more compassionate and kind and curious. And they really go on to talk about the 5 C's as a way of opening up that doorway. So we're not confined, but we're fully human. Right? Not just a man or a woman, but like fully human, actualized being by how we are expressing ourselves, but also not afraid to express ourselves because of some past conditioning or because of some cultural normative that we're just like fed, not even like we bought into it. We're just like fed it.
Yeah.
Right.
But
one of the things I like about the confined masculinity rather than the toxic masculinity, to build on your point, John, is that some people are toxic masculinity and they think that being a male is a toxic state.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Right.
Or they think that being a male is a condition that needs to be treated, a problem that needs to be fixed.
Where's my antibiotic for masculinity?
But, being a male is an identity that embraces certain virtues. Mm-hmm. And those virtues are, courage, strength, nurturing. Think about what the word husband means. To nurture and take care of others. So I think a lot of the language, and this is my next question, a lot of the language surrounding mindfulness, I'm just not sure it's appealing to men. Like mindfulness is a method for self-care. I will tell you, when people start talking about self-care, to me, it just doesn't resonate the way like language like, strength or fortitude would. So I'm wondering what kind of language you think we could use to talk about mindfulness that men would say, yeah, that's something I want to foster. I want to bring more of that into my life.
Oh, well, I'll tell you right off the bat that, Clark, my background is I got introduced to mindfulness when I was in a very dark spot, and I got introduced to it by a counselor. And when he recommended mindfulness and meditation to me, I laughed at him. In complete honesty and transparency, I laughed at him because I thought it was bullshit. And then he said, well, what if I had something that could improve your performance? And what if I had a pill that you could take that would improve your performance mentally, would improve your performance physically? What if I had something that you could take that would improve your sense of fulfillment in life and your productivity, your focus at work? And as a type A personality who's always looking for an edge, and specifically as a former special operator, I was looking for an edge over my enemy on the battlefield or over my buddy right next to me. When he said he had something that was performance enhancing, I was like, absolutely, doc, whatever that is, I'll take that pill. Literally, I said, I'll take that pill. And he's like, well, it's not a pill. It's mindfulness. It's meditation. And so he kind of tricked me into it by saying, hey, you can get this self-care by pursuing performance enhancement by way of mindfulness and meditation. The kind of the side effect is the self-care side. So often when I'm talking to type A personalities, whether they're men or women, I talk about the performance enhancing sides of meditation. And I think that's where it normally lands with them better. And then the side effect is they get all these other things that are normally talked about in the more feminine sense of mindfulness and meditation.
Well, I like Clark. I like the awareness you're bringing up right now, as far as like the language. Like I think it's like, and I'll ask you, Clark. I mean, what you bring up great words like fortitude and strength, and it's like, and it's funny. I think, or maybe we're just such in an early stage in bringing more mindfulness to more men that we need to be clear on how we talk about it. Just like how your I don't know, or your psychologist in the military, John, how he spoke to you about it. It's like performance enhancing or your strengthening, or just and that's like, we're still, and even that language alone kind of is speaking to a confined masculine, in the sense of like, how can I be more powerful, more domineering, more aggressive? I mean, not necessarily think that's like how you're necessarily receiving that information, John, but like maybe that's where we need to start, in the sense of like speaking to men. We have to start. You can only meet people where they're at. So we need to speak to people where they're at. And we need to speak to them in language that makes them feel unthreatened for where their masculinity has gotten them in their life at this point, and then walk them like, here we are, John. I mean, you went from laughing in this person's face to now we're on our 4th season of Men Talking Mindfulness. You know what I mean? And I took you to Costa Rica and we dropped some psilocybin. You know what I mean? So like we've gone way, on the other side, of what confined masculinity is. But Clark, what are your thoughts on those kind of things?
So I think we can talk about mindfulness in terms of how it relates to becoming a strong man.
Yeah.
And what is a strong man? Well, I think that that's a worthy conversation. One aspect of being a strong man, I think, is someone who is able to embrace a lot of what happens in the world. They're able to embrace a social situation, other people, emotionally, without doing things that are destructive socially, physically, and emotionally. So one of my concerns is that some of the ways that men try to appear strong is actually weakening them.
Yeah.
So, for example, like heavy drinking. Heavy drinking is kind of like, I can drink more than the next guy, and being a heavy drinker is somehow related to masculinity. Or being someone who is, let's say, someone who affirms their masculinity by seducing a lot of women, but never really being able to build healthy relationships. Affirming their masculinity by being aggressive.
Or athletic pursuits or something. Yeah.
They're too afraid that if they're not aggressive, people will take advantage of them. And so the ways that people have tried to be strong men are actually, I fear, making them weaker men. And this is where mindfulness can come in and make us as men stronger in a way that will actually make us emotionally, physically, and socially stronger.
Can you just elaborate a little bit? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I mean, it's all those ways of proving our masculinity are really pretty easy, right? So it's easy to go and prove that you're a man, quote unquote, by drinking a lot, by drinking more than your buddy, by drinking your buddies under the table. It's easy to quote unquote prove that you're a man by having these pursuits of the opposite sex. And it's easy to prove that you're a man by showing that you're angry and that you can be aggressive. The opposite of all those is pretty hard. Saying, you know what, I only want 2 drinks tonight. That can be difficult when you're surrounded by a bunch of peer pressure. It can be really difficult as a young man coming up in society when the pressure is there to go after as many members of the opposite sex as you can. It's really difficult to say, you know what, I'm in a monogamous relationship. I love the person I'm with, and you are perceived as weak. And it is really difficult to say, you know what, I just got insulted by this individual over here, but I'm going to control myself. I don't need to physically get into any type of physical altercation with him to prove that I'm more of a man. But for some reason, the easy option is what society embraces as what is masculine. But I believe, if we're truly wanting to be masculine, we need to embrace the harder options. We need to control our emotions. We need to be able to face down that peer pressure. And those are things that we as society need to change.
Yeah, I mean, I would ask, my fellow men, are you strong enough to not give in to peer pressure? Are you strong enough to transcend someone who is being a jerk? Or are you going to have to lower yourself and show weakness by reacting in a way that is not going to be helpful for you? Are you strong enough not to react? Are you courageous enough not to react?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's I've got a soon to be 3-year-old son, and these are ways I need to change my verbiage.
Yeah.
You know, as he is getting upset and throwing a, you know, a little soon to be 3-year-old temper tantrum, I can say, hey, are you strong enough to not be this way? I mean, he's obviously not going to embrace that terminology and verbiage yet, but as he gets older, I can start using terminology like that. And I think we as leaders within society, as leaders within our families, as masculine leaders, I'm not saying that all leaders are men, but I'm saying as masculine leaders, as setting the example for other men and young boys, we need to change that verbiage, kind of change that narrative around. So I'm gonna come back and refer to this episode and use it for language with my own son.
You know, I want to kind of break into that whole idea of and where it comes from to seem weak, right? Which is, I'm sorry, let me just go to that. Okay, cool. To seem weak, I feel like that in itself, that idea, could you call it the perception of being weak, right? So how I'm being perceived as weak, but I'm being perceived that way is because I am going against, you know, the norms, right, of how a typical masculine should act, right? And I say typical in the sense of like, you know, the patriarchy thing I kind of talked about. So we're kind of shamed into, in a lot of ways, like by getting back in line. And I feel like that whole getting back in line, we're just kind of like, I feel like we're kind of on, there's a knowing, or maybe this is my own experience in some ways, but like as a man, like we know that we have the ability to be compassionate and kind and nice and peaceful and kind of follow the golden rule and not be an asshole and take care of ourselves and control ourselves emotionally. We know this. Like, or I feel like there's got to be an inkling in every single human being, because there's a truth in our humanity that of all those things I just talked about, as well as all the things, you know, that the heteronormative values and ways that we exercise our emotions and our actions are part of us as well. But I feel that whole idea of being weak is just a shaming mechanism. So you're not making other men uncomfortable by you being more liberating in your masculinity, and being able to express yourself in a way that goes against that norm that we keep kind of referring to. Yeah.
So it looks like our producer here is telling us we're up against it time-wise.
Yeah. Well, it's your show, Clark, so you tell us how you want to end.
Okay.
Yeah, it's your show. Or it's like we can go a few more minutes.
If it's my show, I want to end like this. I want to end by saying, invite me back to do episode 2 of this discussion, and I will prepare questions in advance, because I think that there's a lot that still can be talked about, and I'd love to have another conversation with you about this when you can fit me in.
Maybe we can have you, and I would love, Will, I'm kind of spitballing here on the show. So listen up, audience. You're seeing the brainstorming in action. But maybe we can have you, Clark, on the show along with Liz Plank, Ed Adams, and Ed Frauenheim, and just have a panel. And Will, you and me just kind of sit in the sidelines while we let the experts talk.
Yeah, I think that'd be
Something
great.
like that.
And like I would love to have you back, Dr. Clark. I know I don't call you Dr.
I have
Clark
no expertise in being man, except that, you know, I've been a man for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, me too. Like, I mean, do we really like? I think just I mean, the way I was raised, like, I'm definitely was that confined masculinity, and I think this is a very important discussion to have. Continually have this discussion, because this is that what we talked about earlier. This is that way of creating an opportunity to kind of soften or down regulate the shield of hyper masculinity or toxic masculinity or confined masculinity, however you want to describe it. So maybe you just kind of peek through a little hole in the shield and be like, oh wait, there's something on the other side. And I would love to continually doing this because, if we only have half the population, of female, say, and I know there's other spectrums of genders and stuff like that as well. If men aren't getting on this ride, then we're not going to move. We're not going to be able to move forward. In a way that creates a society and a world that is better with ourselves as well as better with everything else on this planet. Thanks, Clark. This has been a beautiful discussion.
Yeah, really thanks, Clark. Thanks for pushing us.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks for making time for this.
All right.
And so
until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
peace, guys. Peace. Thank you, Clark.
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.